Today, we're going to look at Marvel and how their Blood Hunt event is going to reshape how Marvel interacts with its characters, primarily through the architect of the event, Jed McKay. But before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notification. Your attention is greatly appreciated, and leave a comment down below to let us know what you think about Blood Hunt when we're done, because I want to hear your opinions about this event and whether or not you think it's a big deal or not so much. So let's dig into it. First off, the Blood Hunt event, and I'm going to go through a series of the uh, press releases that Marvel is putting out, but a lot of what's in the press releases are quotes from the creators directly themselves, particularly from Jed McKay. So what does Jed say about this particular event? And what it is, if it isn't obvious by now, is that we're effectively building a team of superhero vampires, or super vampires, if you will, that are led by a master who is yet to be revealed. And they are intent on taking over the world by infecting it with vampires. And these vampires also have the capability, in some cases, of feeding on regular superheroes. And so now you're getting people that are just not drinking regular blood, they're drinking superhero blood, which can create a number of problems in and of itself. DC did something similar not too long ago. DC versus Vampires has been around for a while. Marvel is either trying to mimic that or trying to do its own thing. Who knows? We'll find out. But this is what Jed McKay says about the intention of this event and how it came to be. Much like Civil War and Secret Invasion, Blood Hunt is a story that has been naturally building across Marvel's comics over the last few years, and some even older stories. Okay, if he says so. I mean, we've been paying attention. I'm not sure I agree with that, but all right. And it all comes to a head this May as Jed connects all the dots. Editor-in-Chief C.B. Spolsky said, as the series unfolds, readers will be able to uncover clues and go back and put the pieces together to see just how high the stakes are for our beloved characters, pun intended. That is a terrible pun. Sorry, CB. Do better next time. Anyway, so what do we have here? It is exactly what it sounds like. It is an attempt by vampires to take over the world. Let's get a little bit more from Jed McKay about what he's trying to accomplish here. How long has been planning this? How long has Jed been planning this event? Jed McKay says it's been a while. I think Tom Brevoort emailed me around the end of March to float the idea of a vampire-centered event, presumably in March 2023. As I was working on Avengers, Doctor Strange, and Moon Knight, which he is still currently working on, and that plays a factor we'll talk about in a minute. All of whom would be pretty well situated to tell a story about the vampire apocalypse. Jed, when asked what draws him to vampires, I think vampires are a fun part of the Marvel Universe. You can enjoy them on a surface level as adding a little spookiness to a book, or you can get as deep as you like into the long-running Marvel history of vampires, which is as elaborate as any part of it. And the fact that Dracula is there is a source of an endless delight. Okay. Talking a little bit more about the planning. Over the past year or so, Dracula founded his very own vampire nation in Chernobyl, which is true. That is apparently a internationally sanctioned country or government or body, if you will, that's centered on Chernobyl. It's nothing but vampires. Humans do work there as a matter of course, but it is apparently a sanctioned governmental body. How does that play into what comes into Blood Hunt? Well, that remains to be seen. Suffice to say, there's no way that something like Blood Hunt would kick off without Dracula being involved in some way, and you'll have to wait to Free Comic Book Day Blood Hunt, the Blood Hunt issue from Free Comic Book Day, to find out how. So there's the basic concept. Essentially, it's a vampire apocalypse. There's nothing, so far at least, particularly overwhelmingly different than what you might imagine or suspect from that. The devil will be in the details. So we'll see pretty much how Jed McKay is going to pull this off. But it all starts with something called the Blood Coven. So what is the Blood Coven? We're going to go to another press release. Marvel's got a lot of press releases on this event. So the Blood Coven are a mysterious and deadly vampire faction consisting of Megrim, Cruel, Unusual, the Demoscene, Smoke Eater, and their leader, Bloodstorm One, a clone of Dracula created by Hydra. The group's motives, powers, and abilities will strike unfathomable fear into the hearts of your favorite heroes. Okay. And their bloodlust is only matched by their extreme brutality and an undying commitment to a dark master. Okay, so what we do know is that essentially you have an Avengers level team comprised of vampires. Their powers are not defined immediately, all right off the top of from the press release. You're giving a little bit about their look, as you can see on the screen. You can also they were given some artistic direction and clarity about where the designs came from and why, primarily through artist Pepe Larraz. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So, for example, Cruel. This one was pretty straightforward. This is Larraz describing how he came up with the designs. A character wrapped in razor wire by his own will is terrifying enough, so that's what he did. I added the cloud of wires at his feet and neck, always moving like some kind of metal gorgon. Okay, that doesn't really scream vampire to me, but I mean, it certainly looks painful. So that's for sure. Smoke eater. The idea is that he inhales ghosts to acquire their strength in combat. Okay, so I made a physical representation of that. He becomes the unification of multiple beings, therefore the multiple limbs, which makes his silhouette pretty recognizable in battle scenes. Okay, yeah, all right, so that makes sense. Damascene. My initial idea was to make them bidimensional, like a paper sheet that will cut you when you try to grab it. But it's very difficult to convey that idea in comics. So from that description, I get that Damascene is kind of bladed, but in a planar kind of way. So maybe I guess the vampire equivalent of a walking paper cut. I, okay, sure, we can go with that. Megrim, probably the most vampire looking of the litter. I hid her face on red cloth, but my idea is that the cloth was always drenched in blood. So that looks sort of like a sorceress type character, as you can see from the picture on the screen. Bloodstorm, the unusual. There we go. The initial idea was to make him a collage of old engravings, always changing, like some kind of sinister Max Ernst picture in movement. But that would present a copyright issue, so I came up with a weird idea. Started with a bunch of parallel lines and used a liquefy tool from Clip Studio to make the shapes with those lines. So something that's always sort of moving but not quite there. A landscape in a bipedal form. All right. And then we have Bloodstorm 1, who is their leader. I gave him a lot of thought because I didn't want to do a vampire superhero, but a true monster who is scary enough that he's even scared of himself. He hides his true nature under a perfect human shell, like some kind of Michelangelo's David, which is rotten inside, twisted, and homicidal. So this is this tall character here that looks like, basically some kind of large marble statue. All right. So that's where Pepe Larraz is getting a lot of these ideas from. Also, yeah. Yep. So, I mean, I guess it's an eclectic team. The designs are certainly unique and interesting. The powers, as far as how what makes them vampirish, other than the fact that they're scary looking, yes. But I don't quite get the vampire aspect of it. I'm not trying to put the concept down. It's just there's not a lot of information here. You have cool ideas and cool designs, but I'm not reading vampire from it. So we'll see. Maybe there's just more to it than we see on the page from Pepe's description. He's at least giving you the aesthetic of how this comes across. But at the very least, it's an original idea. It's an original looking team. Their conceptual designs are absolutely original. And Pepe Larraz is a fantastic artist, so there's no doubt there. But when it comes to the heart of Blood Hunt and who's leading the charge of this vampire apocalypse, this is what we have. Now, there are hints both from the original press release and also from this one that they all serve some darker, more powerful master. Is that Dracula? That I think that would be cliche. There's probably somebody else that they're keeping close to the chest, but we'll see pretty soon. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about are the tie-ins, and I think this is where people are maybe stumbling upon this event with not the positive attitude Marvel is hoping for. Well, wait a minute. You might ask, tie-ins? Pretty much every event has tie-ins at this point, both from Marvel and DC. How many tie-ins we're talking about? We're talking about a lot of tie-ins. So again, Marvel's got another press release talking about that one. We've got the Fantastic Four, Captain America, the Avengers, you name it. Pretty much everybody's getting in on the act on this one. So I'm not going to go through the entire list because, quite frankly, it's huge. It's a huge list. But the fine folks over at Popverse have taken the time to count them up. And guess what? How many tie-ins, one-shots, related integrations, all that? 59. 59. That's a lot. If you average that out to say $4.25, let's say it's $4. $4 times 59, that's 9, 3, 6, 5, 10. That's $236. If you up that by $450, then you're even going higher. So this event is pushing $250 to collect all the individual tie-ins, the one-shots, the main event book, and even and much more if you're going in for the variant covers. That's a lot of tie-ins. Now, the main book apparently for Blood Hunt is winding its way through the Avengers, which Jed McKay is currently writing, with heavy tie-ins to Moon Knight and Doctor Strange, which Jed McKay is also currently writing as the main titles. And of course, Blade has to get in on the action, which currently is being written by Brian Hill. So you got a lot of main books, and there's a list here from Pop First. Starting in March, there's a Blood, not March. Well, yeah, there was an issue there, but we have Blood Hunt #1, which starts in May 1st. Then you have uh, yeah, the Red Band editions, which we're going to ignore. That's kind of silly. Moon Knight May 1st. Vengeance of Moon Knight May 1st is a tie-in. Then you have Free Comic Book Day, which is on May 4th, which also happens to be Star Wars Day. And then it goes all the way through May, June, July, and then a bunch of TBD dates, which presumably will be August through September. So you're getting mostly, I would say almost every main title that Marvel has is getting in on the act. 59 tie-ins. If you collect all of it, you're definitely going to be north of $250. So that's expensive. That's a lot. I'm not sure why they thought that anyone, they meaning Marvel, why they thought anybody would be willing to spend that much money. But if you're a completionist, and you need to have everything that's associated with a particular event, more power to you. God bless you. May your money be spent well. But yeah, that's a lot to ask for. But before we go too much further, let's also kind of recap where we are with vampires in the Marvel universe, so we know kind of where we were, where we are, where we're going forward, and then we can talk about Mr. McKay and what we think about his ability to pull this off, which is questionable. Before we talk about Jed McKay's role as architect of Blood Hunt, let's recap of essentially how vampires are currently situated within the Marvel universe. As we mentioned previously, there is a vampire nation that occupies current day Chernobyl. The president, or the king, if you will, of the vampire nation in Chernobyl is Dracula. Humans do go in and out of that country. They do work in that country. Sometimes they will go into that country and they work as, for lack of a better term, blood donors. Why anybody would do that, I don't know. Marvel made that a thing a few years back, and it's stuck. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's just the way it is. What is Blade's place in that? For a period of time there, right, wrong, or indifferent, Blade was sort of the sheriff of the town. His intention was to say, if I can't wipe out the vampires because they're now a nation that has been internationally sanctioned, I'm going to make sure that they stay contained and keep the peace. That didn't sit right with a lot of people. And in the current Blade run, written by Brian Hill, he is either on sabbatical or he quit that job. They never really explained why he's no longer associated with the Vampire Nation on a regular basis. But it is what it is. Now, in addition to the Vampire Nation that's situated over Chernobyl, you have pockets of vampires that exist primarily within the New York City metropolitan area. For example, Lady Yuan, who is a 700-year-old vampire, is the leader of a mobster gang of vampires that occupy a portion of New York City. Her role recently came up in the Spider-Man Gang War event, but she didn't wind up taking over the 5 boroughs for whatever reason. And she is I won't say a regular occurring character, but she's a commonly occurring character within the Moon Knight series as well, because Moon Knight is, as you can imagine, operates mostly at night, and his path has crossed with vampires. So that brings us directly to Jed McKay and how he's used vampires and how he writes his stories in general. One of the consistent critiques we've had of Jed McKay is, on the negative side, that is he struggles with writing compelling, strong villains for his heroes. The heroes are pretty good. The scenarios are decent. He comes up with decent plots, but writing strong villains is a weak spot for Jed McKay. So that's concerning when you have an entire story, an entire event, a very large event that's wrapped around Jed McKay's architecture of a story, when he has consistently, at least in the past, had trouble writing strong, compelling villains. It's all about the villains when you talk about vampires. So now Blood Coven looks interesting. Okay, so that's a step in the right direction. But let's also look at past behavior, which is also an indication of future behavior. The one time that we've seen, at least in the past couple of years, that Jed McKay has written vampires is when he wrote vampires in Moon Knight. And in that particular arc, a vampire who looks like an accountant, I don't even remember his name because he was so unmemorable, tried to essentially start a kind of a multi-level marketing organization of vampires to become a rival gang to Lady Yuan and the other vampire gangs that are in New York City. It was not a particularly memorable arc. The way Jed McKay portrays vampires isn't particularly strong, and the one troubling aspect I think that hurt more than anything else is during that final confrontation where he was. When Moon Knight came in and was fighting different vampires, Reese, who is actually a vampire that works for Moon Knight, went up against a villain by the name of Zodiac, and Zodiac used his name necklace as a vampire ward, which effectively breaks vampire lore. And we did a video about that last year to kind of dig into why that was a problem and why that from a lore and a mythology and a rule set perspective that actually winds up damaging and lessening the power of the vampires, which is unfortunate. And so that kind of brings us to our concerns about Jed McKay. Jed McKay is an okay writer. He's not A-list. He's okay. Where Jed McKay consistently struggles is with writing compelling villains. The heroes he pretty much gets right. The plots are okay, but the villains are generally weak. Only once in a while has he had a truly compelling villain, most notably with General Strange in his Doctor Strange run. But that's about it. His villains are either forgettable, you barely see them, they're not charismatic, and when you have an entire event wrapped around vampires, and it's based upon Jed McKay's writing, who is one whose past examples of writing for vampires was pretty weak, and struggles with compelling villains, that's a red flag. Now, Blood Coven, that group, looks interesting. We'll see how it shapes up. The descriptions seem pretty weird. They don't seem very, very vampire-ish, but that's a step in the right direction. Now, if Jed McKay can get the help he needs to write a compelling master, whoever that master turns out to be, and can construct a plot that's full of energy and strong pace and gets the heroes up against villains and a scenario that is equally compelling, okay, then we might have something there. But for right now, tentative, a little bit, I would even say tepid about Jed McKay and his ability to write something that involves vampires when A, he struggles with villains, and B, he's broken vampire lore in the past, which is a red flag on both counts. So where does that leave us? Marvel is putting all their, well, I won't say all their eggs, but a lot of their eggs in a pretty big basket compared to DC, which is putting a lot of risky eggs in a small basket. Marvel is going the opposite direction, but with winding up with the same level of risk. Vampires are tried and true opportunity for heroes to go up against something that could end the world. Vampires have been around for, DC's done a lot of DC versus vampire stuff, so we know that works, and we know that gets a certain level of popularity. The tie-ins are massive, and I can't understand how an LCS can sustain that many tie-ins and get people to buy into that. So that's an odd choice. McKay as the architect is an okay writer, but his ability to write vampires has not been so great, and writing compelling villains is also not so great. And the timeline of this is spanning basically May through almost October, which is May, June, July, August, September. That's almost 6 months. That's almost 6 month long event with a lot of tie-ins that costs a lot of money. And so there's where we are with Blood Hunt. It's a lot. It's vampires, but it's a lot. So I know we're sort of all over the place, but we're trying to hit some of the major points to kind of give you some points of consideration. But what I want to know from you is, are you excited about this? I'm not trying to put you off, but at the same time, I also want to understand what is the draw for you, and also from the mind of Marvel, what is the draw for Marvel to think that an event based on vampires that is this massive is going to be the draw that's going to get everybody excited? And I'm not quite sure, because one of the things that we also find out, and because I interact with a lot of comic readers all the time, as you can imagine, is for some strange reason, superhero comic readers and horror comic readers don't overlap a whole lot. For some reason, people who like superhero comics don't like horror as much as you think they would, which is strange to me. I love them both. As a matter of fact, I love them equally. I love horror as much as I love superheroes, but apparently I'm uncommon. Well, who knew? Go figure. Well, what about you? Do you like horror comics? Do you like superhero comics with your horror? And what do you feel about this event? And what do you feel about vampires in general? I want to know all of it. I'm looking for feedback. You guys got to tell me what's going on here. I mean, I'm sort of seeing this as a big thing that sort of looks okay, but not really. But maybe it's me. But I want to know your opinion. Leave a comment down below. If you're not following along, we'll provide some updates as we get them, but I want to hear what you think about this. Is this getting you excited for Marvel? If you've been put off by some of the dumb stuff they've done lately with Amazing Spider-Man and all the constant reboots to number ones and all these other problems, is this getting you back on board with Marvel? Or is this just seemed like a lot of bloat, to be honest with you? And just leave us a comment, let us know. So we're going to pause right here and switch over to the newsletter so we can cover the rest, and then we're going to finish up for the rest of the day. All right, switching gears to the newsletter. First up, our pick of the week from last week for all the reviews that we did, and which are all pretty good, by the way. I don't think we had a stinker in the bunch, but still one rose to the top. And we knew we were going to have a shootout between Conan the Barbarian number 9 and Duke number 4. And surprise, surprise. Well, it's not a surprise. Conan the Barbarian number 1, I should say number 9, won out. And that is our pick of the week. So if you are subscribed to our Substack newsletter, the audio version is there for your listening pleasure. But if you're also subscribed to us on YouTube, we have a video version of that review. So go check it out. You're going to enjoy it as much as we do. And if you interact with Jim Zub at all, give him a big thumbs up because he's doing a fantastic job on Conan. And we're looking forward to seeing him do it for many more years. Apparently, he's got a 3-year contract, so that's a good thing. Let's talk about the reviews from last week. As we said, the pick of the week is Conan the Barbarian number 1. But if you want to also pick, just pointing out some highlights, Duke number 4 was pretty good. We had a new publisher on our list, Zorro, the Man of the Dead, or Man of the Dead number 3 from Massive Publishing. That's the Sean Gordon Murphy version of Zorro. It's an unusual take on the Masked Man, but we liked it. Actually liked it quite a bit. So I've heard some ups and downs about this, but I think generally speaking, we're positive on Zorro. So I would go reach out to Massive and check that one out. Also, which seems to be very popular, is the first issue of Sam and Twitch Case Files number 1 from Image Comics, which are Sam and Twitch from the Spawnverse engaged in a murder mystery of sorts. And that was an okay issue. It didn't blow us away, I'll be honest with you, but it was decent enough. Now let's talk about what's going on. Obviously, what's going on for next week. We have Simon Says number 5 and E number 4 and Ice Canyon Monster number 3, all from Blood Moon. We have 2 indie submissions. One is Focata number 1 and Bite Size number 1, which was really meant to be published on Scout, but we're getting a lot of, how should I say this? We're getting a lot of refugees from Scout. I don't know what that's about. Scout's apparently having some troubles. Maybe they'll shake out, maybe not, but there we are. Next up, we have Machine Girl and the Space Angles number 2 from Alien. That is the publishing distributor for Valiant. Guma, the Beginning of Her number 5. Robotech Rick Hunter number 4 from Titan. We have Torpedo 1972 number 2 from Ablaze. Cinderella Murder for All Seasons from Zenoscope. Kong, as in King Kong, The Great War number 5 from Dynamite. And Red Sonja Empire of the Damned number 1, which is a new miniseries for Red Sonja fans. Now, next week is a big Image week. We have Antarctica number 10. That is the finale of that second part of that arc. We have, here we go, Geiger number 1, Redcoat number 1, and Rook Exodus number 1, all the Ghost Machine entries from Jeff Johns. Yeah, Jeff Johns, and they're being distributed through Image. So that's pretty big. We have The Sacrifices number 7, which is the return of Rick Remender's fantasy series, which was phenomenal if you read the first 6 issues. And then we have Void Rivals number 8, which is a continuation of the sci-fi spinoff from the Energon universe, and Gunslinger Spawn number 30. Big week for Image. Big week for Image. So we're looking forward to it. I'm sure several of them will be good, if not all of them, but we'll see how it goes. So that's it. That's our newsletter for the week. I hope this was enjoyable. I hope this was informative. Again, please let us know what you think about the Blood Hunt from Marvel. There's a lot to it. It's pretty big, but there are some flags there. There's some yellow cards at the very least. I want to know your opinion. Leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think. But that's it. I'm Gabe Hernandez, your publisher in EIC for Comical Opinions. Thank you very much for joining, and you have a great day.